We are on a journey to fit our Toyota Hilux Canopy camper with a custom-built drawer and cupboard system, making a life on the road a little more organized and aiming to reach the full potential of what this particular rig can actually offer. We have a full documentary coming up in the following weeks, showcasing the build process from start to finish as we design, assemble and fit the cupboards, but there's something really important that has to happen first. Electrical builds can be quite daunting, particularly when you haven't fully wrapped your mind around the theory of how everything actually works. When it comes to choosing cables, crimping, heat shrinking, fuses, amps, volts, watts, resistance, all that good stuff, sometimes it's best to just let an expert handle everything. Or is it? I had a basic idea of what I wanted to do in the camper with regards to my electrical system. This would be about taking a step forwards from my previous setup, adding a second lithium battery, a more powerful DC-DC charger, a better inverter, and a feature-filled distribution board with every output, input, and switch I'd ever need. I wanted to consider weight distribution and efficient use of space. So the plan was to put the batteries, the DC-DC charger, and the inverter right at the center front of the camper, behind the fridge and out of the way. This meant taking a 3D scan of the back of the bakkie and of the fridge and making enough space for the battery compartment when designing the cupboards. The distribution board would need to be way more accessible, and we chose this open space at the rear of the camper which would allow easy access from inside and outside. The idea was straightforward, but building it would take a little bit more effort, and after doing some research and struggling to find anyone in my area who firstly understood my vision but secondly had time to help me, I eventually decided, you know what, let me just do it myself. It can't be that hard, can it? We are just a few weeks away from leaving on our Kalahari trip, and there's still so much to do. I'm actually stressing a little bit about it, but the whole back of the bakkie here is going to be dramatically changed. We're going to be building in our cupboard units, and part of that build is going to be figuring out what to do with the 12 volt. We do have a plan. We've got a 40 amp DC-DC charger from National Luna. I've had the same DC-DC charger prior, but in 25 amps. The reason we're going up to 40 amps is that we now have two Blue Nova lithium batteries, and these things are so light compared to lead acid batteries. You can actually pick them up with one finger, which is awesome. So two Blue Nova batteries, 108 amp hours each. They'll go right in the front there, and then directly above that we'll mount the DC-DC charger, so nicely out of the way right in the front. The cable will run all the way here, and just inside this part of the bakkie we're going to fit a board roughly this size with a bunch of outputs and with our monitoring and fuses and all of that. The idea is that this must be easily accessible if we want to charge camera batteries, charge phones. You know, you're accessing the vehicle from the back and from the side, so this is accessible nice and easy, and from the inside as well. So this is the battery monitor, and it comes with a proper length of cable, so we can essentially run that cable from the back all the way along here and to our panel. This company is amazing. Part of the reason I like to support them is it's a South African brand, and also they've just been around for a long time, extremely reliable, extremely well made, never had any issues with National Luna stuff, so it was the natural choice for this build. Looking forward to getting everything fitted. We also have a new little 20-litre fridge from National Luna which will carry our drinks and will sit on the back seat in a position that's easy to reach while we're driving. The extra fridge capacity will turn out to be very useful on our upcoming trip, but more about that later. With most of our components purchased, it was time to get started on phase 1, which would be the battery box behind the fridge. A simple wiring diagram gave me a mental picture of what needed to fit where, and with that, I set to work. We've gone ahead and bought some L brackets. We've got these little black ones, and then we've got these larger galvanized ones, and we're going to be using these to mount things to our new setup. These smaller black ones are going to be used to mount the circuit board, or not circuit board, the distribution panel that we're building. And then these, you see that slot there? That's perfect to run a strap through. So we're going to bolt these down to the floor and use these as battery mounts. However, these all have M6 holes, and we need to drill them out to M8 because everything we're going to do in the setup is going to be M8, keep it nice and modular. And for that, we're going to need the good old drill press, which doesn't get used enough in my workshop. So I'm glad I can finally put it to use.
I started by drilling the brackets out to 8mm and then traced the mounting points on a piece of 18mm shutter ply and drilled out some 10mm holes for the T-nuts. These brackets will go on all sides. Straps can be run from the side here over the top to keep it down, and then this T-nut gets hammered into the bottom of the plywood floor, and an M8 bolt comes from the top and threads into the T-nut. I tell you what, I haven't done woodwork since I was like in my early teens, and I used to love it back then, but I've kind of just haven't done any of it in a long time. I tell you what, I can feel that little kid in me coming out again. So there's our battery mounting board, all the T-nuts in their places in the back, and then we've just got 2 of these cam buckle straps. Run the straps through these loops, tie the batteries down, and from there this whole board can be mounted right behind the fridge, and we can remove this board separately if we need to work on anything here, as opposed to trying to like remove each individual battery every single time. So that should make it nice and easy. But I need to find a place now to mount the DC-DC charger and the inverter, and I don't think we're going to have enough space to mount them vertically above the batteries. So I think what we're going to need to do is to build a sort of top level here. We'll run some plywood up the sides on both sides. We'll run another piece on top, and then obviously we'll bring our cables up through a hole to the top layer, and on the top layer we'll mount our DC-DC charger, fuses, inverter, all of that, the stuff that we actually might need to access more often, and we'll make that nice and neat with some speaker box material or carpet or just something to make it look nice and neat on top. This speaker box material is stuck on using spray-on contact adhesive. Quite straightforward, and it just makes everything look a little less homemade.
Right, so nice and neat, there's our top panel. We'll take some staples when I can go to a friend of mine's house who's got proper staple gun and just make sure the speaker box material is held in place. But the batteries will obviously have all the cables that they need, but those cables will pop up through here, and we'll have the DC-DC charger, we'll have the inverter, and we'll have a couple fuses as well mounted on top here. So this will be the sort of accessible part, and then the batteries, which we won't often need to access, will be underneath.
And now it gets interesting because this is the part where we have to start planning where all our cables are going to go, and drawing wiring diagrams and installing fuses and all that stuff, which is kind of, was a week or 2 ago way out of my comfort zone, but I've now done some research and I know what I need to do. As far as the DC-DC charger goes, which is this National Lunar unit, this is pretty straightforward because in the manual, National Lunar gives really good, easy to understand wiring diagrams. The only thing is their wiring diagrams only show 1 auxiliary battery, and we've got 2. There's 2 ways to wire batteries. You can wire them in series or in parallel. If I had to wire these in series, it would remain 100 amp hour capacity, but I'd be using a 24 volt system. We don't want to do that. We want to keep it 12 volt, and we want a 200 amp hour system. So we're going to wire these in parallel, which basically means we're going to have our positive going to our positive, we're going to have our negative going to our negative between the 2 batteries, and then we're going to take the opposite poles, so positive from this side and negative from this side, and then that's going to go to everything else. So pretty straightforward. I went ahead and bought a bunch of different cables in different thicknesses. There are calculators that you can use online to figure out what size cables you need, but essentially we want to have cables that are thick enough that if we're running high amps through the cables don't heat up and we don't have significant voltage drop. That's the only problem with having a 12 volt system. Lower voltage means higher amps. If we had to, let's say, wire this in
in series and have a 24 volt system, well then we'd be running half the amps, so we could use thinner wires. And you'll see later, once we install the inverter, we're going to be running 220 volt to the switch panel at the back, and we'll be able to use much thinner cables. But anyway, we've got our cables. I've invested in a basic crimping tool for the smaller stuff, and then we've also got a kit with heat shrink and different terminals. We've got spade connectors, which, you know, that's going to be helpful with all our little 12 volt outlets. Just plug the spade connectors into each other. It'll allow us to easily remove them and switch them out at a later stage. And then we've also got our fuses or fuse boxes that came with, for example, the DC-DC charger, and there'll have to be a fuse coming from the for the main battery to the DC-DC charger, and then a fuse going from the DC-DC charger to the batteries. And what we're going to do is, on this blank canvas on top here, we'll obviously put our DC-DC charger where we want it. We'll put our fuse boxes down here so it's easy to access them, and then this space will be for our inverter, and we'll wire that up. We also got this lovely box today, and this is part of National Luna's contribution to the build. I'm really excited about this. But this switch panel we have at the back here, we're going to need all kinds of different connections. So National Luna has supplied a whole bunch of Anderson plugs. We've got red Anderson plugs for the main input from the batteries to the panel at the back. We've got blue plugs, which will be our solar input. So if we want to put a solar blanket out or wire solar panels to the roof, we'll have a blue Anderson plug where we just plug the solar in. And then they've also given us a bunch of 29mm sockets. So we've got USB quick charge sockets, we've got Hella plug sockets, and they didn't have any cigarette lighter sockets in stock, but we'll have to source those separately. And then of course we have 220 volt outlet on the board as well. So I've basically just got one of these, just a normal like wall socket, and it's got a switch, and it's got a 3-prong and a bunch of 2-prong outlets. So we'll be able to plug in laptops and all that if we need to charge that. Yeah, let's get to work.
When purchasing lugs and terminals, it's important to make sure that they are the correct size for the wire you're using. I've seen far too many lugs that are way too big for the wire, and even when crimped down hard, they just don't maintain a proper hold on the wire. This is the benefit of doing this stuff myself. I don't have to rely on someone else's integrity. Plus, I might add, crimping and heat shrinking is kind of fun. I didn't have a heat gun, but it turns out that a jet boil works just as well. Before I bolt down the DC-DC charger, I need to make sure that the inverter also fits properly. So I head to Piri Solar Distribution and pick up a 800 watt Victron Phoenix pure sine wave inverter.
As you can see, this thing is a bus, and I might have slightly miscalculated the width of board I need to mount this, but that's okay. We'll probably just make a couple mounting brackets that stick out a bit. We do have space to play with behind the fridge, so yeah, it's all good. We'll fit it right there. The width is perfect. We've got space on the left here to run cables out. This cable and this cable need to run to the battery, so we're going to put a hole down here for the negative cable, hole down here for the positive cable, and then these two need to come through here to the main battery, also with the 25mm cable. We have not yet connected the DC-DC charger or the inverter to the batteries, but before we actually connect it up, we need to select lithium mode on the DC-DC charger. It will not allow you to do this once the auxiliary battery is connected, so this has to be done first. I learned this the hard way before. I had to call National Luna and they're like, oh, you just disconnect the aux battery, it'll be fine. So we're going to go ahead and do that. This is our power coming from our main battery. We're going to plug in here to the Anderson plug. It is currently set to AGM/gel battery, which is not what we want. We want it on lithium ion. So we are going to do that. And then I think, just hit battery until you're on lithium ion.
Now, I'll be the first to tell you that I am by no means a 12-volt expert, nor am I a woodworking expert, but there's something so fulfilling and rewarding about learning a new skill and becoming sort of proficient or capable in that skill. And this build is forcing me to do that. I could outsource it to someone else, but being able to do everything myself and learn how to do everything sets me up for the future, in that, you know, if there's an issue with my wiring, I can sort it out on the road. I'll have the tools, which I have to spend money on now in order to do this. I'll have the understanding of what gauge wiring I need and what connectors I need and how to crimp and solder and all that stuff. And it's fun to learn something new. So that's kind of been what this whole experience has been about for me. It's not just about getting my vehicle ready, it's about learning a new skill set. So still have a lot to do, but I'm enjoying it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now to conquer phase 2, which is building the distribution board. It begins with a blank canvas, a simple piece of plywood bolted to a panel, and this one comes with no instruction manual whatsoever. I draw up a basic plan to make sure that I have a place for everything I need, and once I'm happy, a wiring diagram gets drawn up too.
So here you go, there's our brackets mounted nicely, and this plate is going to be fitted basically flush with this end part here. However, this part is coming straight down, but this is at a slight angle, which means that these two brackets are going to be slightly further apart, and there's going to be a gap at the bottom edge of this plate. So all we're going to do is add some washers here to shift this this mounting bracket slightly in, and that should line everything up nicely. So yeah, starting to take shape. So this is where it gets a bit fiddly. We've done all the big cables, which are a little bit easier, but these tiny little cables, which are going to connect sort of our USB sockets and our other 12-volt sockets here, these have to run across like this, and then we're going to have some more cables running to our fuse box over here. So we have to repeat this process, make a whole bunch of these, make sure that they're all securely crimped and connected. We're using these little spade connectors that I've just gotten the kit off Take-A-Lot, and it seems like they'll work pretty well. So hopefully we can knock a bunch of these out today.
The USBs, cigarette sockets, hella sockets, and all other outputs will be controlled separately, so all loose cables get labeled to avoid confusion. A quick test to see if everything works, and I tell you what, it feels really good to see something light up for the first time.
So we've done a bit of a test with the cable from the main battery. It's charging at 40 amps, which is what we wanted to see. And now we're testing the solar. So what we've done is we've plugged in cable from the solar panels. This is a solar blanket from DAG Outdoor, a 200 watt solar blanket. We're obviously not getting the full 200 watts right now because the sun is at a bit of a low angle, but it is working. So that's awesome. Okay, wiring up the electric blanket. We're going to have the electric blanket assigned to a switch on the switchboard, so we can turn it on from down at the bottom, or we can turn it on using Bluetooth from the fireplace if we're getting a bit cold and want to heat up the tent. So cigarette lighter socket, that's going to go in this little slot in the side of the tent here, and that means that we don't have to keep the electric blanket plugged in. We can plug it in once we put the tent down and set up our bed. We just run the cable in the side slot through the zipper here. So there's the bed. Once the bed is down, we've got the USB charging ports and stuff over there. But if we pull this Velcro back, we can actually access the electrical cables that run through here. So all we need to do is run that cable in this main wiring loom and down through the grommet, which is all the way back there, and it will come out right over here.
All wires that are connected together, no matter how small or insignificant, get properly insulated with heat shrink, and for the wires running up into the roof, I decided to use these mini Anderson plugs so that they are easy to disconnect if I need to work on the panel. And talking about Anderson plugs,
when wiring up these Anderson plugs, or Brad Harrisons, whichever you want to call them, it's really important to get them the right way around. I've kind of learned this the hard way in the past, but in the Anderson plug, you'll see two like metal leaves, and on the connectors themselves, there's these little hooks at the end. Those hooks have to come through and basically clip on to the end of the leaves. The leaves are only there to hold these in place. The contact actually happens between these terminals. So these terminals basically clip over each other and current runs directly between them. I made the mistake in the past of thinking that these leaves inside the plug are what conduct electricity. They're not. So it's really important that you put them the right way around so that these lips hook properly onto the leaves. Otherwise, if they don't hook properly, they'll slip down. You'll have the current running through the leaves and you're going to get a lot of resistance there. That just means you've got to consider which way you put these when you crimp them, because if you put them, let's say, backwards the wrong way around, you're going to have to twist the cables in order to get your positive and negative the right orientation in the right way, and that's going to make life really hard for yourself. So yeah, it's just one of those things you have to either learn the hard way or be taught by someone. So I'm trying to teach you now so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. This is the cable that runs from the batteries, and then we'll get plugged into an extension that runs to power the whole switchboard. We've got a 50 amp inline fuse here, and you may be wondering why we need a fuse on this side also if we've got that circuit breaker and a bunch of fuses on the other side. Well, fuses are there to protect the cables, and if there's a short circuit somewhere between this battery box and the circuit board, then it doesn't matter if we've got a fuse on the other side, we're going to have issues on this side. So yeah, the fuse should be close to the power source.
One eternity later.
Okay, well, fast forward a couple of weeks. I've just arrived back from the US. I'm jet lagged out of my mind, but the upside is that while I was over in the States, I picked up something on Amazon that's going to help us a lot in this build. If you look over here, this is a fuse box, and then this is a switch panel with a whole bunch of different switches and some stickers that I can put over the buttons depending on what I assign each button to. It's really simple. Over here I just add my positive and negative for any device that I want to switch on and off, let's say lights or USB ports or anything like that. And then there's a fuse for each input, ranging from sort of 15 amps to 30 amps, and then this just runs directly to that, and I can assign each of these buttons to whatever I plug in here, which is pretty awesome. This is nice and small, and this is going to go on here. And we're running out of time. We've got like basically 2 weeks until our trip. 2 weeks may sound like a lot, but we haven't even ordered our aluminium and wood yet for our cupboard build, so it's getting pretty tight. Right, everything is connected in here, fitted in its place, looks really good. But now it's time to test it. So instead of connecting to the main batteries, I've gone ahead and just plugged it into the Goal Zero to make things a bit easier. And as you can see, we've got power. As far as I know, we just switch the whole thing on or off. There you go, it's on, and then we can run through each of these switches. So each switch corresponds to a terminal on this fuse block, and as you can see on the fuse block, you've got everything from sort of 10 amp to 30 amp on both sides, so we can assign certain things to different amp ratings. So I'll probably have these at a higher amp rating, have the USBs at a slightly lower amp rating, etc., and we can just figure out which one of these assigns to the USBs. There you go. So this switch would be USBs, but if I want to have the USBs on a different switch, I can also just plug the USBs in somewhere else. In wiring up this bad boy over here, I need to make some decisions as far as cable thickness goes. You obviously want to keep it as light as possible. We're going to be running a cable from the front of the canopy all the way around to the back, which is going to be a few meters of cable. And we will want to consider voltage drop, but we also want to look at how many amps we actually need to draw, how much current we need to draw for the things that we're going to plug in here. For the most part, the USBs are not going to draw that much. They'll charge up camera batteries and phones and stuff like that, but won't do it with a huge current draw. We've got the sort of 12 volt cigarette sockets and hella plugs, which once again are probably going to be used for lights and electric blankets and stuff like that, which don't draw a huge amount of current. And then we've got these, which are basically 2 auxiliary plugs. These are the 2 that we need to think about, because we need to consider what are we actually going to plug in here. And I'm not one to be plugging in massive appliances. For me, the only thing that I can think of that I might plug in fairly regularly is this guy right over here, which is a portable 12 volt air compressor for filling small scuba tanks when I shoot with my air rifles. And this draws 25 amps. So that's actually perfect, because we've got 30 amp fuses on that fuse box. 6mm squared cable is rated to 50 amp current. So I think we're going to go ahead with this. It's easy to find, it's not that expensive, so we've bought a good few meters of this, and I think we're going to use this to run from the battery at the back to the main circuit board. I don't think we're ever going to draw anywhere close to 50 amps at any given time. And then obviously from the fuse box to the Anderson plugs, we're going to use this too. That should keep it relatively lightweight, relatively easy to wire up, but it's not going to struggle to conduct that current. So should be good right there. I have to say, this looks really professionally done. Even though I'm very much still an amateur and this is my first attempt at this, I couldn't be happy with the way it turned out. So I'll run you through everything quickly. I'm sure you know already, but let's just show you how it all kind of turned out. I can switch this whole panel on and off here, so if I want to just kill all the power, I can do that, although I'm more than likely going to leave it on the whole time. I can adjust the display brightness here, adjust the display color over there, and then each switch is individual. So heater, that runs up to the electric blanket upstairs, so if I want to turn that on and off from down here I can. Auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2, that's these 2 big Anderson plugs here. Now these are on a 30 amp fuse. USBs, I'm busy charging a little torch here, so I'll leave those on, and then I can turn the inverter on and off from right over here, so I don't have to go all the way back to the battery compartment and physically switch the inverter on and off. There's a remote switch, which is super cool. That's one of the reasons I wanted to go with the Victron stuff. And then interior lights, can turn those all off at once, so I don't have to walk around the vehicle and switch them off and on individually. Fridge, that will permanently stay on. And then yeah, 1 and 2, those are these Hella plugs and 12 volt sockets, which we'll use for charging batteries and running a second fridge and things like that. So yeah, really happy, looks very neat. I'll keep testing over the next week while we prepare for the trip, so that we don't have any surprises while we're traveling, but overall extremely happy.
In the next episode, it gets even more interesting as we get to work on the canopy cupboards. I know you guys have been waiting for this for a long time, and I promise you this will not disappoint. The team that helped me to get this to the finish line did an incredible job. We managed to build everything ourselves right here in my backyard, and I dare say it far exceeded my expectations. Make sure you subscribe to follow along, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.